You're listening
to the CD Baby DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 76 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner, your host for the show, and this week you're going to hear from Corey Smith. Corey Smith made headlines when his independent music career slowly grew into a multi-million-dollar business, selling out large venues normally reserved for those with chart-topping hits. No, it wasn't some sort of internet trickery that built his following. Corey simply toured diligently and worked hard to make honest connections with his audience. As his fan base grew, he stayed focused on building that connection and being intentional with his business decisions. Oh, and he did it all without radio airplay or a record company marketing his music. So there's lots of good stuff in this interview, so let's get to it. Well, joining me on the phone is Corey Smith. Corey, how you doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
Well, Corey, you've made some pretty big headlines with the amount of success you've achieved as an independent artist, basically doing it really just on your own without an industry machine. I mean, you do have a manager who has been instrumental in what you do, but for the most part, it's just been you really connecting with fans and building a fan base. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you started this whole journey at?
Okay, well, first of all, I would say I haven't done it, entirely alone. I have a great manager, I have a great agent, attorney, accountant, and a great group of people with me on the road. So, I owe a lot of it to having talented people who are passionate about my music, being a part of it, and building the infrastructure that we've needed to grow. But we have done it without the assistance of a major label. We've done it without radio. We've done it largely based on touring, grassroots market development, and just getting music out there and encouraging people to share music, whether they burn a CD or download it for free or buy a record. Obviously, we prefer they buy a record, but either way, we want people to share the music with one another. I came into music sort of through an odd route. I was a high school teacher for 4 years. And while I was teaching, I was a hobbyist. I had written songs. I recorded a few very cheaply made records, and was playing in North Georgia within a 2 or 3 hour radius of my house, and just had this sort of gradual fan base built. And eventually I had to make a choice between teaching and music. I knew that the potential was there in music because I was getting more and more offers to come and play at bars, and more and more fans were coming out, more and more money was being generated, and it was actually spiraling out of control to a point where I knew I couldn't manage it. And so that's when I started working with my manager, Marty, and from that point on, when I made the decision to stop teaching, it's just been a matter of making sure that we've been maximizing the growth opportunities and putting the infrastructure in place to make that happen. Yes.
What were some of the things that you were doing early on that seemed to really be working to connect with the audience? You said you were just a hobbyist, but obviously you probably took it very seriously as a hobby, even though you were a hobbyist. But what seemed to be the signs that this is working and this could go somewhere?
I noticed that people were coming to bars and singing along to the songs. The very first time I went out of my hometown and played a show, I went to this little town called Dahlonega, Georgia, and there was a small bar there called Buster's that comfortably held 100 people, but they would pack 300 in there sometimes. But I got asked to come and play at that bar, and I remember I got paid $50 to bring my gear up there and play an acoustic show. And the first night there, I didn't know what to expect, and there were 150 kids that came out, and I started playing the first song, and they started singing along, and I couldn't believe it. And I can't really put my finger on exactly what it is that makes people that connect with the music, but there's some quality to it that resonates with certain types of people. I definitely learned early on that there were certain techniques I could use to grab people's attention. I was playing in a lot of bar settings, and I didn't want to play cover songs. I tried to minimize the amount of covers. I wanted to be able to play my own material. So I started figuring out ways in my own writing to grab people's attention, even though they may not have ever heard the song before, using images that are familiar to them, using catchy hooks, just, using the techniques that commercially successful songwriters use. I did a little bit of studying of that and tried to incorporate it. And I think since then I've sort of moved beyond it and tried now more to focus on being authentic and writing what's true to me. And I like to think that if I maintain my integrity and try to hone in on whatever my message is intended to be overall, then things will work out. I had a guy tell me early on that people like good music, and if you make good music, there's going to be a market for it. So I like to think that my being authentic, my being genuine, and continuing to pursue this journey of growing as an artist will be profitable. It will, there will be a market for it.
Back in those early days where you like you mentioned that club show or that bar show where you went and people were singing along, was it people that had seen you before, or was it just kind of this thing that you started realizing that people that hadn't seen you play before already know these songs and are getting them from either their fans, other fans talking about it, or already buying it ahead of the show? What was the experience there?
No, those were fans who had never seen me before. Those would, I guess, were my first fans. My first record, and I use the term record loosely, I guess, was just a collection of demos that I spent $800 to record. I'd won an open mic night really close to my hometown in a small town called Monroe, and I won 12 studio hours at this at a place called Higher Ground Media Group that normally recorded Southern gospel music. Mm-hmm. So I was sort of this oddball secular acoustic singer-songwriter who goes in there, and I at that point I'd written 50, 75 songs, and I picked 11 that I thought had the most potential, and I just recorded these very rough acoustic demos. And I had to come out of pocket $800 to sort of make up the difference. I ended up going over the 12 hours a little bit. So for me at the time, shelling out $800 was a mortgage, and it was a big risk, and I was super nervous about it. But I figured, if I can just sell 100 CDs to my friends and family back in Jefferson, then I can make my money back, and I'll make my mortgage payment. So I had confidence that I could do that. So I made this record, and ended up having a CD release party at the somewhere in town, and had my friends and family come out and sold 80 CDs that night, and then sold 20 or 30 more over the next couple of weeks. And oddly enough, that first batch of CDs started spreading its way around because my friends were giving CDs to some of their friends, and people were burning the CDs and taking them to their colleges. People from Jefferson who went to college in Athens or Dahlonega or Statesboro or Milledgeville or Atlanta started taking these little CDs back with them and sharing them with their friends, and it just grew organically. So that the first time I traveled to Dahlonega, there was a group of a couple of hundred kids there who were familiar with these rough acoustic demos that I have. And oddly enough, that record is still our best-selling record. I'm not fond of it, but it's our best-selling record.
Well, sometimes those albums that are made on a shoestring budget, when you just don't know how you're going to make ends meet, have some of the best character. You mentioned things started getting out of control at one, and you had to bring in some help. How long did that take from when you decided, okay, I'm gonna give up teaching and do this full time, but now I need help?
It was about 3 years for me, from when I released that first record to the time when I stopped teaching. In retrospect, I probably could have used management about 6 months to a year earlier. But hindsight's 20/20. For me, it was important to make sure that there was stuff to manage, I guess, before I gave it up. Early on, I was doing all my own booking and collecting and settling the shows, and I was just traveling with just me and another guitar player in my own car, and I could handle it all. And later on, I couldn't handle it all. I couldn't negotiate contracts. I was getting taken advantage of by a lot of the club owners because I was naive about the business. But yeah, after 3 years, I started really realizing my shortcomings. And it was a shift in the way I thought. Before I was, really paranoid. Like, well, I don't want to have to pay, a manager a commission. Somebody's just. I figured everybody was just out to screw me, because that's kind of the popular conception of the music business. There's all these people who are just out there to screw over the artist. And that's not the case. There's a lot of really great people in the music business who have families and who are passionate about their jobs and are, and their interest converges with an artist's interest. And I was fortunate to find that with Marty and Cass and Robert and all the people who were part of my organization. And when I met Marty, it was obvious that we shared some similar ideals about artist development, about the way that about the independent nature of what I was doing, the sort of grassroots market development. So it was timing. Right when I met Marty, I was talking to several other managers at the same time, and he just stood out to me as being someone very similar in their beliefs.
Yeah. How did you find him? Because I know I talked to a lot of artists that are at, kind of a similar point where you were, where things are starting to get a little bit crazy and they really see that, okay, this could be a full-time career, but my inability to manage everything is kind of holding me back. But it is scary, like you said, because you're handing over something to somebody else, something that you're passionate about. How did you weed out? You said there were some other people that you didn't go with, but how did Marty show himself to be the one? You said you had some similar ideals. What were some of those ideals?
Well, I met Marty through booking my own shows. I was, as I said, traveling 2 or 3 hours away from my home, playing in these small bar and grills. So that meant, like a lot of artists out there, I was sending out demo CDs and press kits and calling these bars, and half of them weren't calling me back. But it was really frustrating for me because in many of these cases, I had already found out from fans through my website that I could pack out these bars. And a lot of these bar and grills were really in the business of just bringing in talent to entertain the people there who were eating wings and drinking beer. They weren't really bands that were bringing in the crowd. However, I knew that I was going to be good for a crowd. I knew that I could charge a cover and that the bar would be really blown away by the results. However, it was hard getting through to the people at these bars. Now, I met Marty because there was this a Wild Wing Cafe in Anderson, South Carolina, and I wanted to play this place. I knew it was perfect for me at the time, and Marty was buying talent for that club, in addition to managing a roster of about a dozen artists. And I sent him an email, several emails, like normal, telling him the numbers I was doing at other places in the region, and I think he was sort of shocked by the detail I went into in the email and by the numbers. And I think he was a little skeptical. So he called around to check on some of the numbers. Because at that point I was bringing out 400 or 500 people in Athens. I was bringing out 300 or 400 people in at least 5 markets. It sort of, I guess, got his attention. He calls me and we have a really long conversation. And we talked about a book that we'd both read called the Future of Music, Digital Manifesto for the Digital Music Revolution, it was Leonard and Cusick who wrote the book.
Yeah.
But we had both read it, and so we started, just talking about this book. And one thing that he said to me that still really sticks out is he told me at that point, he said, "You know what? You don't need a manager. You don't need a manager until you absolutely can't handle doing this yourself. You need to do it by yourself for as long as you possibly can." And I respected that. And he didn't know at the time how out of control it had gotten. And less than a month later, we met face to face. He came to a show, and we just had a great vibe and started working together. And that's my advice to artists starting out. A lot of artists get ahead of themselves and put the infrastructure in place before there's really a fan base, before there's anything growing organically. They go ahead and get the manager, they get the publicist, they get the agent, and they've got all these hands in the pot before there's really anything in the pot. And with the way technology is now, with MySpace, with Facebook, with Twitter, with all the opportunities to get in front of crowds, it's pretty easy to gauge whether there's going to be something there to manage. So my recommendation is to do as much as you can for as long as you possibly can. Find out if there's something there to manage, and if there is, then start putting the infrastructure in place to manage it.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Once you got all those booking and management details off your plate with Marty on board, how did you take yourself as an artist to the next level?
That was a quintessential part of it, because I was much more involved in the business side of things at that point because I had to be. It was survival mode, so I was having to negotiate with club owners. I was having to, worry about taxes and things like that, which are complete artistic buzzkills.
Mm-hmm.
They use completely different sides of the brain. Once the infrastructure was in place, all of a sudden I've got all this time to devote to songwriting, which is essentially what it's all about. And now I have more time than ever to do that. So it's an essential part of growing is putting talented people in place who you can trust, letting them do their jobs, and then working on what's most important, and that is the art.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the future of music. We've actually had Dave Cusick on the podcast before. Great guy. What are some of the ideas that you've put in place with promoting your music from that point on that may have been different from how people approached it in years past?
The main thing I got from that book wasn't anything specific, a specific technique. What it was the overall message. And the message was this, that you can succeed in this age without being a celebrity. You can succeed as an artist without being on the radio, without being on the TV. I remember one of the stories of an artist in Indiana or Illinois that was mentioned in that book, and the guy made like over $100,000 a year just touring in little bars within a 2 or 3 hour radius of his house. And that was exactly what I was doing at the time. And up until that point, I didn't realize that it was really a viable plan that I was doing, that there were other people out there doing it. It changed the way I looked at succeeding in the music business. I knew that for me, just to be able to make a good living and provide for my family doing what I love was success. And all I needed was someone to explain to me how that was possible. And that's what that book did to me. It just got me fired up and changed my priorities, changed the way I looked at what I was doing.
I'm sure that's infiltrated in the way you make decisions moving forward, because you've been a top seller here at CD Baby with previous albums, and I'm sure this new album will do well. I'm sure there had to have been, people coming alongside you, making offers and promising you even bigger success, but you've stayed away from that.
Yeah, we really haven't went down that path. We've talked to lots of different labels, lots of A&R people, people who've been involved with really big projects, and to me it's flattering to know they want to find out more about me, that they're interested. But it's never made sense for either us or the corporation. It's just never been practical. I think that the things that are endearing to fans about me are largely the things that make me unsuitable for being someone packaged for the masses. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What are some of those things that you think make you endearing that it might be hard to package for the masses?
Well, for one, I can say what I want to say. I can use profanity. I can completely contradict myself from one song to the next. I'm not worried about an overall image as much as I am worried about writing songs that ring true to me in a certain moment, trying to capture a moment in song. So I have a lot of leeway as a commercial artist tied to a corporation. You don't have that kind of freedom, and I understand why you don't have that kind of freedom, because when you're tied to a partner like that, there's a whole organization of people who depend on the artist being profitable, and it just changes the way you have to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not knocking it, saying it's better or worse, or knocking artists who are signed to major labels. I'm just saying, for me, it hasn't made much sense because it doesn't allow the freedom that's been a very important part of what we've done. Also, I don't have the personality for the masses. I don't do well on camera. At my shows, I don't dance around the stage or pose a lot. I'm not a model. And the masses, they're used to their artists being packaged and presented to them in a certain way, and I don't think I could do it. That's not to say that a big part of me doesn't want it. As an artist, I want as many people as possible to hear my songs. I would love for my songs to be on the radio. There's a certain validation that comes with that. Despite what I've been able to accomplish, there's people who still don't think I'm successful because they've never heard me on the radio. And there's a certain, I guess, egoistic, desire to have that. But unless an opportunity came along that made sense, that gave me the kind of freedom that I think is essential, then we can't really go down that path.
Well, the thing I like about what you're doing and other artists that are kind of reaching that level on their own, there's more and more stories like that starting to emerge, is that you're setting yourself up for long-term success as opposed to just immediate success that's dictated by, some marketing executives or label executives somewhere determining how much money they can make off of you.
That's what we've said from the beginning. It's sort of our mantra. We're in this for the long term, and things are changing so fast. Sometimes it's easy to doubt ourselves, but at the end of the day, that's what we come back to. We think that the connections that we're building with fans doing it this way are going to be more lasting connections than than those that are made through the mass media. We'll see.
You've got this new album that just came out. What was the experience with this album like? I mean, I'm assuming you had a much larger budget and that you were able to record the way you wanted to and do things right.
Yes, it largely comes down to resources. And by resources, I don't just mean financial resources. They're obviously a part of it, but I mean the resource of experience and talent pool. For me, this is my fifth studio record. And each record I've had, yes, a larger budget, but I've also been able to learn more as a producer. I've produced my own records, so that's involved a lot of going in and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and making more mistakes and learning from those mistakes. It's involved, finding the right players to come in and help realize my vision. It's involved finding the right kind of studios, working with the right kind of partners. I co-produced this record with a guy named Rusty Cobb, who had more of a pop rock background, and I thought that made for a very interesting dynamic that allowed for some of the more pop rock edge to come out in my writing. So this record, to me, it showcases how I've grown as a songwriter, as a producer, and even how the business has grown, because there's obviously more resources, more financial resources tied up in it. My first record cost me $800, and this one cost me $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't feel right though if I was continuing to make $800 records. I don't think the fans deserve that. I'm trying to invest an appropriate amount back into the things that make it all possible.
Well, that kind of brings up an interesting question, because you, obviously, it's your business, and you have, like you said, talented people that you trust on board basically working for you. How do you make those kind of business decisions and budgets and things with, we're going to spend this amount of money on the album, and, because it's all, coming from your pool of money instead of, going to a label and getting the cash from them and then hoping you make it back?
It's a matter of getting the information from a business manager and finding out what's realistic, and then going in the studio with that in mind. Here's what we have to spend. Here's how much time we can allocate. And it makes it pretty easy, especially when it's been such a gradual process. For me, the independent nature of this, the gradual building of it is maximized my growth as an artist, because I've been able to grow gradually. As I said, that first record, $800, the second record, $2,000, the third, $4,000, the fourth, $20,000, and now So when this record, when I'm starting out with $60,000, that's nothing really to a major label. It's not going to sound nearly as polished and refined as what we might hear on the radio, but for me, it's a huge budget.
Oh yeah.
And I was able to chalk off over a month to devote to the recording, and so that to me was huge. So I was just blown away by it, and I feel like with this record, I made the most out of the resources that were available to me. I feel really happy about it, and I'm hoping that fans are going to receive it well. Some fans like the old Corey, they like the old acoustic, ripped down, raw sound, and I understand that, but I feel obligated to continue growing, to continue experimenting, and pushing the envelope. And I feel like I've done that, so I'm very happy that it's out now. I just feel such a tremendous relief and sense of excitement that people are finally hearing it.
Well, you are more than welcome to pass on this next question, but I know that a lot of our listeners at this point are probably wondering how much money you're grossing every year at this point. If you have the ability to spend $60,000 on an album, I know some numbers were being thrown around on the internet, but I was just curious if you had any comment on that.
I can't comment because I don't know for sure. I would be afraid to give the wrong number, because I think that's happened in the past. The number that's going around the internet, that whole $4 million, I don't know where that came from. I think that's probably a touring gross, but I know my wife could tell you we didn't make $4 million.
Well, I know with artists, a lot of times they like to throw out the gross before the manager, the business manager, the booking agent, before all those people got paid, which is what gets to the artist is much, much smaller.
Yes, it's very difficult to say. I know last year the net to my business was over $2 million. Can I say that? I could probably say that fairly.
Okay.
After touring, but there's still lots of expenses that come out of that. The guys that I tour with are all salaried. There's record expenses and all the touring expenses. They really mount up, and the largest expense for me at this point is developing new markets. Mm-hmm. We go into the Northeast to the Midwest. And the tours normally don't profit. So I'm bearing the brunt of that. But it's kind of like I'm financing my own deficit tour support. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy with that. So I don't know that I will say I've been astonished by the financial success we've had. I never expected it. And I just feel very fortunate. I do know that this economy is taking a toll. And I think I was at a really sweet spot as far as my profit margin went 2 years ago. I'm not at that sweet spot anymore. Now it's a grind. Now my expenses are starting to catch up with me, and it takes much more careful planning. And I'm not rich. I don't have a house at the beach. I have a house in a subdivision, and a pretty normal middle class lifestyle. So I'm not rich by any means, but I feel very fortunate to have financial security, doing something that I really love.
Mm-hmm. Well, we love sharing mistake stories on the podcast, and I'd love to hear if you had a mistake story or two that you did and looked back, something that happened, you looked back and went, oh my gosh, why did I do that?
Oh, certainly. I've got no shortage of those. One thing I really regret was the amount of time that I let the environment that I was playing in dictate my behavior. I started out playing in bars, and drinking was a big part of that. I was a weekend warrior, so it was easy for me to go out and drink on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, and then go to work and do it again the next week. When I stopped teaching, I found myself full time now playing shows, and I think I let the drinking become a part of it, and I think as a result, I played a lot of really crappy shows. The drinking doesn't help the learning curve on stage, and every performance is a learning experience. And I regret the amount of shows that I overindulged. We still drink, and I still sip a little bit on stage, but I'm never in a situation. Well, I shouldn't use the term "never." That sounds a little bit too concrete, doesn't it? I feel like over the past 2 years, in particular, that I've maximized my learning opportunities on stage, that I've grown as a performer, and that I've been healthier and happier touring because I haven't let the environment of the show dictate how I was going to behave during the show.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice, because I know a lot of artists that I talk to kind of deal with the same thing. You're there, they give you free drinks, and then if night after night you can let that become an issue.
Yep.
Well, do you have any final words of advice before we close out this podcast?
Well, and maybe perhaps this other mistake might serve as some final advice. I think looking back, there are times where we probably should have been very happy with what we had. We could look at particular markets and where we were doing really well at a certain size club. At a 1,000 cap club, for example, go in and sell it out, and then we feel the pressure to move to a bigger club,
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to the bigger club, and oftentimes it ends up, we may bring out more people, but it's not as profitable because the expenses of that next club go up, and there's a lot more pressure involved in it. A lot of times there's been a big learning curve in regards to how to develop markets. And at the end of the day, I think we could be happier with just where we are. Be thankful that we're at this 1,000 cap club and are able to do well at it, as opposed to constantly feeling the need to up ourselves and get bigger. And bigger is not always better, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's probably not good closing advice, though.
No, that is good advice, because I think as artists, especially, if you're an independent band that's trying to establish yourself, that sometimes it's easier to look at like that bigger venue in town and see like, when we're there, that's going to be the better shows, and realize that, that when you're packing out the 200, 300 seat club every night, that sometimes it's good to just enjoy that and do better there than move up to, like you said, more pressure and bigger venues. And now you got to get a lot more people out to not lose money. So,
maybe the lesson to pull from that is to take very calculated risk. Don't just throw all caution into the wind. Quit your day job and go for the gold. Take a calculated risk and make sure that it makes sense. Look at the numbers. Even though we're artists and we don't like numbers, it would behoove us to get familiar with them enough to be able to make educated decisions, make calculated risk, so that we can eventually have the security that we need to grow as artists, to not have to worry about where the rent's coming from, and be able to just create art.
Well, that's good advice. And your new album is out, and I'll put links to it in the show notes for the podcast. I assume you're going to be touring North America for quite some time in support of the album, so I would encourage everyone to check it out. Are you have any plans for any international touring for this album?
No, we've never toured internationally. We do have an offer to go play in Amsterdam in March, which would be our first international experience at touring, and that would be super cool. So hopefully we're going to do that, but we're very regional. We stay in the Southeast, from Florida to Louisiana, through the Carolinas, Virginia, Arkansas. That whole area is certainly the core of our fan base. But more and more we're reaching out to the Midwest, to New England, out to Colorado, to Texas, and we hit those places a couple of times a year. So, we'll be somewhere close to you probably.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Corey for taking time to talk to us. If you have a comment or feedback about this episode or any past episode, there are several ways in which you can weigh in with your opinions. First, you can call our listener line at 206-426-5683, and we might just play your comment on a roundtable edition of the podcast. You can email us at info@cdbabypodcast.com, or you can leave a comment under the show notes for this episode, and you'll find those at cdbabypodcast.com. We're going to close out this show with a track off of Corey's new release called Keeping Up with the Joneses. So here's Corey Smith, and we'll catch you next time.
Back in the day, back in the hills, we were busted, made a living on the government dime. Mama wouldn't keep a job, and the alimony check never came on time. We were poor, I wasn't proud, only angry that my daddy couldn't send us more. Always embarrassed by my free lunch card and food stamps for the grocery store. No keeping up with the Joneses. No keeping up with the Joneses. When you're stuck on the bottom, you take what you can get. You say, ooh, 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 ooh. I went to school and hand-me-downs from my cousin. Baggy breeches seemed to suit me well. Kinda thin and kinda loose in the middle, slouching in after the tardy bell. The teacher never called me trash, but I knew what she was thinking when she looked at me. Born to be the underclass, growing up to make a living on our charity. No keeping up with the Joneses. No keeping up with the Joneses. When you're stuck on the bottom, you take what you can get. You say, ooh, 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 ooh. Don't go looking down your nose at me, neighbor, I can spot you from a yard away. Don't try to judge me by the clothes I'm wearing or the cars in my driveway. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor any longer, and I'm happy as a man could be. I'm proud to work, I'm proud to pay my taxes, and I'm grateful for my family. No keeping up with the Joneses, no keeping up with the Joneses. When you come up from the bottom, you love whatever you got. Say ooh, 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 ooh. No keeping up with the Joneses. No, no, no. No, 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 no. Ain't nothing, ain't no one gonna hold me down. Ain't nothing, ain't no one gonna hold me down. Ain't nothing, ain't no one gonna hold me down. No, 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 no. Oh, oh.
You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.